So hello, everybody. This is the session that we will start in like 2 minutes. Of course, this is one of the virtual session with the Youth Knowledge Forum 2022, organized by Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum Knowledge Foundation, alongside with the UNDP, waiting for everybody to join on this session. And we will start after that the discussion with our esteemed speaker. I will introduce him later. For now, you can see him. Let's tease you a little bit, and then I will introduce him. So waiting for all of you to join us here on this virtual session. We'll be talking about education, the transformation of the education through technology. I'm really looking forward to it with Dr. Sameer. So we'll have just under 2 minutes to have everybody gathered in this session. This session will be translated simultaneously in French and, of course, in Arabic. It's amazing. Everybody can follow and assist to this session and as well in so many languages. And we'll be speaking in English with Dr. Sameer, but there are translations simultaneously in English, in Arabic, and in French as well. That is amazing. With Dr. Sameer, before this session started, we were talking about how amazing this era we are living in, despite everything, because of, the outcome of the technology and what is giving us a lot of advantages. One of them to be here from so many different countries and definitely continent as well. And you can assist this, even though it is in English, but you can assist it and hear it in French and in Arabic as well. And thank you, Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum Foundation, Knowledge Foundation, for all of this. Honestly, it's a lot of hard work, but it's very beneficial for everybody. So thank you. We'll thank you later as well, but just now because I'm waiting for everybody to gather around. So all the team, they are working in the background between the foundation, of course, Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum Foundation, and the UNDP team. They are here. I know some of the names. They are working hardly. So thank you very much for making this happen for everyone. So whenever you want, if you feel that people are gathered, you can tell me, because you know if people are here, we can start. Very good. I gave the green light to start. So hello and welcome to the Youth Knowledge Forum 2022, organized by Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum Knowledge Foundation, alongside, of course, with the UNDP. In this session, we will be discussing the transformation of education through technology with our esteemed speaker. Please welcome with me Dr. Sameer Kishore, the head and founder of the Immersive VR Lab and Program Coordinator for the Master in Science Robotic Program at Middlesex University Dubai. Welcome, Doctor, with us.
Thank you very much, Naoufer. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you. Doctor, not long time ago, education was limited or pertained to the reading of books and listening to the teacher, which sometimes can be fun and sometimes was boring to the student and very, very tiring to the teachers. They have to speak for hours and hours. Modern technology has completely reshaped the entire education system and rapidly. My first question is the normal. How can we describe, how can we define the education system today? Is it blended? Is it still traditional? Something is overtaking the other. How can you describe it?
It's a very good question, and it's something that we can, spend the rest of the hour just discussing that
True.
one question. So, because there's so many aspects to it, there's so many facets to it. It also depends on the kind of education we're talking about. If we talk about higher education, let's say we're talking about undergraduate education, it's a completely different way of teaching and learning as compared to, let's say, even in high school. So the expectation and the medium through which these kinds of the teaching and learning is carried out is quite different, and the expectation from the student is also quite different, right? So when we try to define the traditional form of teaching and learning and education, as you mentioned, it is typically a one-way kind of one-way in direction, where the educator or the instructor is talking about the material. The students are passively, let's say, listening, making notes, maybe kind of zoning in and out sometimes. But the idea is for them to kind of pay attention and listen to the educator, the instructor, and develop some sort of understanding of the material. That's the classroom setting. However, there is that expectation from the student to do self-study. There is that kind of self-learning aspect to it that is also implied, and that is also something that is part of the traditional education system. So regardless of whether we talk about technology now or not, self-learning is an essential and integral part of education, where we expect students to put in the effort at home or even collaboratively with friends. The idea of technology and the usage of technology in the last few years has really kind of transformed both of these kinds of education, whether it's in the classroom or it's in terms of self-learning. And even in the classroom, I mean, I say typically, it's a one-way direction. It doesn't have to be. There's several kinds of things that can be done in the classroom as well without the usage of technology. So it's kind of unfair to say that it's been a one-way kind of delivery from the instructor. There have been a lot of innovations, even in terms of teaching and education in the classroom, that don't rely on technology and are not kind of this monotonous delivery by the educator. But yes, it's true that in terms of talking about the new technologies and even talking about how it's accelerated in the last few years because of the pandemic or whatever, it's been really amazing to see the way it has changed.
Even the self-learning, you got me think, we had the self-learning, you and I'm older than you, but still we had both of us, the self-learning. You remember we had the library. We go and the encyclopedia and the books, it's different. Now they have, the smartphone to self-learn at home. So my question, in what way technology today, because of the pandemic or before and now, is transforming? In what ways it is transforming the education?
In so many ways that are, it's almost impossible to understand the true implications of the change that is happening as well. As you mentioned, that in the library you have access to encyclopedias and books, but the time and the effort that it takes to access the same amount of information has become absolutely minimal now. So the same information, regardless of whether the information stays the same or not, even though that has changed as well, and you have access to so much more information than the contents of the physical library next door, you have access to a lot more information, and you have super easy access to it as well. You have it at your fingertips. You can research on any topic, you can Google any topic, and more than that, even in terms of the access to that technology, it's becoming much easier to find the right, kind of information as well, super quickly. So in terms of, let's say, how technology has transformed education, we can look at the classroom, for example. We have incorporated a lot of technology in the last 2 years in terms of education. We've taken the whole thing the entire kind of delivery of education online as well. And it was really great to see how quickly we adapted, which meant that we were all, up to some level or the other comfortable with the technology, that it took us very little time to just completely get used to this new system of communication, whether it's communication in terms of this kind of webinars that we're doing now, or in terms of regular classrooms, 5 hours a day. And that allowed us to continue with our education, even though we had a huge global kind of pandemic to deal with.
Yeah.
And of course, in terms of self-learning, I mean, in addition to having access to all of the material and resources, we have online videos, we have a lot of resources for self-learning in terms of materials that you can watch, in terms of interactive quizzes that you can do, and not just that, in terms of let's say expertise that you can reach out to and connect with and communicate with instantly. So there's so much of that available as well.
And you started actually telling me about the benefits of technology in education. Can we have a special answer for this? What are the benefits of technology in education? Because we started seeing the results already, at least for the last few years. So how can you describe it?
I think for me, again, if I'm thinking of one benefit that I personally can appreciate as well, is the customization and personalization of access to this information. So we have so many different learning styles. Some students prefer to read, some students prefer to watch interactive videos, some students would prefer to communicate with someone online or communicate with someone in terms of understanding the material better. And technology has allowed for any of these approaches to be used effectively. So again, like we talk about the traditional, where it's the library, where you have access to, I guess, some sort of videos as well in the library. So it's not fair to diminish that. However, given the kind of technology and the access to technology that students have now, it's so much easier for each student to decide or to understand what it is that they prefer. What approach is it that they prefer in terms of learning new concepts? Some people like watching a video, some people prefer to read, some people have some sort of maybe they have a difficulty in reading a large amount of text, but would prefer to hear the audio version of it. So and all of it is accessible and all of it is fair. Anything that helps you in order to gain an understanding of a concept is acceptable.
Acceptable and accessible as well for now, for the technology. You remember Dr. Sameer, there are different type of students. There are students, they cannot focus for more than 1 hour or even less. They don't want, for example, to listen to somebody talking for 2 hours. They cannot take notes. But now, as you say, there are completely different pedagogical way of learning that each student will choose which way is better and convenient for him. That is amazing. That is priceless. Now, come to a very important component for this education, doctor, that are the teachers. How does the teachers think about using technology? Do we need to teach the teachers to be able to use technology in teaching?
Yes, for sure. I mean, it's whether we accept parts of it or we accept, the entire concept of applying all sorts of technology in the classroom, to some form or the other, to some level or the other, teachers have to embrace technology. And it's unfair on the students, and it's not going to be sustainable if you don't, because technology it's not like it's going away. There are advantages in doing certain things traditionally. However, you cannot discount the kinds of convenience and the kinds of advanced approaches you can take when you incorporate technology. So for example, again, we keep talking about the pandemic because it's really kind of transformed the way we used to think about education. We had online classrooms, we had self-paced video, let's say, courses available online on Coursera and Udemy and these kinds of websites. However, the way in which we embraced technology and the way in which worldwide schools and universities had to accept and start using this kind of technology, the online classrooms, was miraculous to see. And it kind of showed that teachers had to have that training and had to have that level of comfort with this technology. Of course, now with the let's say the usage of technology, you also have to think of how you can use it most effectively, and that is something that is still people are discovering, people are exploring. I myself am in the process of understanding that now, even though we go back to in-person classrooms, I don't want to let go of all of this technology and this experience that we've had. And there are certainly ways in which we can incorporate it in a very effective way that saves, let's say, time, energy, talking about sustainability. If we can somehow not just completely forget about what happened in the last 2 years and go back to how things were, that would be a little unfair. And that would be a little bit of a waste of the understanding and the learning that we've had in the last 3 years. So I would really encourage and kind of think about how educators and instructors and teachers can be trained into using all sorts of emerging technology. So online classrooms, yes, but even talking about things like virtual reality and talking about things like AI and machine learning, as much as we can, let's say, understand how this can be used in the classroom and educate the teachers on how they could effectively use these tools, it would be really nice to have in the classrooms for the students and for the teachers.
You actually answered my follow-up question, which was, what are the emerging technologies that can be incorporated in a classroom? And what we are talking about, only videos or with Zoom, or like you said, virtual reality. If we can enumerate them, list them, it will be good for our viewers and followers here to know about them.
Sure. Before I answer that question, please feel free to interrupt me. I tend to just...
No, you are great, doctor. No, excellent. No. It was amazing. I agree that we have a follow-up, thinking almost the same. So go ahead, please.
All right, great. Good to know. So again, this is a very nice question, and it makes me think as well about the kind of technology that we've been using. I mean, we've become so used to it, we don't consider PowerPoint or slides to be some form of technology as well. So that is at its most basic level, some tech that everybody is used to using. But if we're talking about emerging technology, if we're talking about things that are still, let's say, in the kind of not research phase, but haven't hit sort of the mainstream, you could think of using virtual reality, artificial intelligence. I will elaborate on each of these points as well. So VR, AI, again, if we're talking about more from a computer science point of view, even robotics, the subject that I teach at the university as well, you don't really need to only know robotics for the masters in robotics. Robotics can be a great platform for students that are learning other kinds of computer science, let's say, degrees as well. So talking about virtual reality, just to kind of give a little brief introduction. So my background is in VR. I've done my research and my PhD has been related to applying VR in various different disciplines. So with VR, what tends to happen is that you wear the headset and you're viewing this virtual environment that is completely different from the one that you're actually physically present in. And this can lead to very interesting changes in perception. This can lead to this feeling of presence, is what it's called. Sorry.
Give me, doctor, the best example of how you've seen virtual reality in action in education. Just, I want to imagine with you. Give me an example.
To give you a super quick example, we have seen the use of virtual reality in, let's say, in high school biology, right? That's one of the most common ones, and that's one of the most used ones as well, where students learning biology, instead of looking at the anatomy of a human on a book or on a printed piece of paper, they wear the headset and they're able to view everything in 3D in front of them, life size. They can use the controllers to kind of interact with the various, let's say, organs and bones. And not only that, it's also in a way collaborative. So you see the other students as well within the virtual environment. So it's a very collaborative, immersive, and experiential approach. So that's one of the other things that these technologies allow us to do, is to have a hands-on education.
Amazing, Dr. Sameer, you are talking, and I remember the example, I'm sure most of you here had it. We desiccated a frog in the biology classroom. we don't have to do this anymore. That was cruel. So we have only to use the VR, and we can, you know, go through the body of a frog or a human being or a rat or anything. That is, now I can understand. It's amazing. How about, for example, the artificial intelligence, for example, how it can be used in your point of view?
Right. So AI, in terms of, again, I'm talking about general education.
Yes.
AI, there are these things, there are these concepts they've developed that are known as pedagogical agents. So these are, let's say, a little virtual character on your screen, or a virtual, let's say, software that helps you with your self-learning. So coming up with quizzes, coming up with content. So all of that is developed using artificial intelligence. Especially with machine learning, what you can do is there are platforms and programs available where you can provide the entire, let's say, content of the, let's say, subject to the artificial intelligence model. And then the AI model can come up with multiple choice questions for you, can come up with statements for you. There's this brand new kind of thing that's been out maybe a month or a few weeks called OpenAI. And that is really blowing people's minds with how powerful it is. And if we have the chance, I can maybe show you a demo of it as well.
Yes, please. I would love it. Since we are talking about it, do you want to show us now?
Sure. Yeah. So it's a new it's a new kind of technology that has been that's available for free for now, because they're still in the research phase. It's anybody can make an account and access it. And I've been kind of playing around with it as well to see how well it can work. And it's just it's just miraculous. It's almost a little bit scary to see how accurate it is. Let me try to share my screen and see if I can.
This is interesting. I feel always the best way of teaching is by examples, and the example you're giving us about the ER is very interesting. You made me think and imagine, you know, the body of the human in a biology classroom, and now we will see the AI in action actually. And one of the examples, because there are unlimited actually examples of how we can use AI in education. So now we have your screen, Doctor, with us.
So this is a new program that's just been released as a sort of in its research phase right now. It's available for free to use, and it's the way that you would use it is similar to Google, but it's a lot more advanced in terms of what it can do for you. So if I were to ask it a question, do you have a question you would like me to ask it in terms of some sort of high school topic?
How am I asking? Am I asking the machine?
Yeah. Can you tell me something about any topic that you have in mind?
The human brain.
Okay. Human brain as if I am 12-year-old. Let's see this.
Thank you, Dr. Sameer.
So you see this.
Wow, it gave me an answer. Sure, the human brain is very complex and powerful organ that is located inside our skull. It is made of up of billion of tiny cells called neurons, which are connected to each other in network. The brain is responsible controlling all of the function of our body, from the way we move and talk to the way we think and feel, and it is also the center of our nervous system. It's amazing how it gives us the answer in, I think, a fraction of a second. So, Doctor, this is one of the examples. So you give him, could you list? Yes, please, go ahead with another question. It's amazing.
You know, could you list some functions of the brain? And then it will provide me
could do some function of, okay, that's a follow-up question. Oh, wow, it listed them.
Yeah.
So it looks like Google. What is the difference between it and Google?
So the difference between Google and this is that the artificial intelligence and the machine learning behind this program is very different. So this one is developed as a conversational agent. So like I mentioned, the pedagogical agent is more of a kind of conversational, as compared to Google, where Google will show you a million results. and then you're supposed to find the correct resources. This one, there's pros and cons to it as well. So it's giving you answers as if you're communicating with a real person. However, you don't know what the source is. You don't know whether it's accurate or not. You obviously need some sort of understanding already in order to be able to verify whether what you're seeing is correct or not. But for these kinds of questions and for these kinds of projects and subjects, it's very, very effective. You can even ask it to, since we're talking about, let's say, how teachers can use it, we can even ask it to make some questions. Could you develop some questions for on the topic of brains? Let's see how it does. I haven't tried this before.
Let's try it together. How does the brain control our movement? Oh my God, it gives you, oh my God, that's a very long quiz. Interesting. So he gave you already 10 questions. Do you know what I thought now? It is really also, saving times and energy for a teacher, bringing up a new question. That's good. I'm looking at multiple choice question. Oh, it sent you the QC and multiple question. This is a new quiz. This is an exam that was made, Dr. Sameer, in a fraction of a minute.
Yep.
Actually, a second. Interesting. There are a question that I have received now, and it says, how will this tech empower or technology empower students to control their own learning journey? Amazing. Excellent question. How do you think it will empower them?
It's a great question. And actually, I feel like as much as the technology can play a part in empowering students, I feel like the role of the educator and the instructor becomes even more important here in order to make sure that the students have access to the right kind of technology and the right kind of resources. Because genuinely, when we look at the kind of tech that's available, it can get overwhelming. It can get a bit too crazy to think about the millions of different options and the millions of different resources that we have. So at that point, it's the responsibility of the experienced educator to ensure that the students are guided in the right direction.
Got it. I have one question though. How can we assimilate, the topics that we learn in classroom to the technology? Meaning, I got connected that biology VR, and for example, history to videos that can give us, some in simples, the history, what happened in 30 BC, for example, or something. So how can we assimilate topics to which technology is best to be used? There are studies that have been done.
Yes. So that's a very good question. And that's something that we're finding out as we're going along. So because these technologies are so, coming into the mainstream now in terms of education, we're seeing how we can use this technology. So for example, my own research actually uses virtual reality for psychology. So so there's that aspect of it as well. Sorry?
How, doctor? How we use psychology, VR for psychology?
So there's, again, two main streams. For example, one is about, if we're talking about training psychology students using virtual reality, is about telling them, let's say, using VR for treating phobias. So using VR for treating post-traumatic stress disorder, using VR for understanding social psychology and social behaviors as well. So all of these things, they've been shown to work really effectively in VR. And these are tools that the psychology students can learn about, see that they exist, learn how to develop these and use them once they've graduated as well. So it's about, let's talk about exposure therapy. Describing exposure therapy through VR, where you take them onto a height of a building and allow them to experience it, then take them to another height and another height as they keep getting comfortable with it. This is an example of exposure therapy that is being shown to them in a super safe and controlled manner, talking about fear of public speaking, talking about fears of certain kinds of animals. All of that can be brought into the classroom as an example using virtual reality instead of actually bringing a spider in the classroom, which is probably not the safest.
Yeah, I can use it for the cockroach. It will be very interesting to see how I can heal from this phobia.
And with, sorry, just to finish that thought, with virtual reality, the fact that it's all completely computer graphics, you can decide how you want the cockroach, for example, to look like, how far away you want it to be. Do you want it to be massive? Do you want it to be tiny? Do you want it to have cute little ribbons on it? You know, it's all up to you. So
interesting. It's really, I feel that, yeah, that can be very, very effective. Amazing idea that I didn't know. Thank you for this. Now, if we can, no, psychology, VR, biology in my head also can be VR. What other technology, emerging technology that can be used to other, you know, material in classrooms?
Right. So when we're talking VR, we have many more. So history, as you said, videos, we can also have history in VR where we're recreating events that have happened in the past. Education. So the biggest thing that's happening with VR right now is, you know, you must have heard of the metaverse, where it's the discussion is about having a social virtual reality platform, where instead of having conferences and meetings and classrooms on Zoom, you actually go into VR where you can see your fellow classmates, you can see the instructor in front, and it's replicating an in-person experience at home. So you can't even divide, as you are right now, whether the event is in person or whether the event is online. Now it's kind of like an online in-person event. So it's kind of blurring the lines between these two methods of connection as well. So in that sense, VR can be used just to replicate regular classrooms for any subject.
Yeah, and that is interesting. Now I want to come back to reality. Reality, why? Because while you are talking, this is amazing. I like technology. I'm not an expert in it. I know there are people better, much better than me, and less. So if you have a teacher that knows, for example, from the smartphone, he can say hello and use WhatsApp. How can you want him to teach and use, for example, VR or artificial intelligence or all these emerging technology? Is this one of the most important challenge, plus resources? So I want to tackle the problem of challenging, the challenges in implementing and incorporating the technology in the classroom or in this educational system.
No, it's a very valid point, and it's something that is one of the bigger challenges that we're facing right now, where we want to be able to incorporate these technologies. They have a learning curve. Getting the access to them is also not very easy. The cost is also a problem, especially when we're talking about, you know, certain universities might have the budget or the resources to have 30 headsets in their classroom. The others can maybe only afford to have one, and that completely changes the experience, right? So it's a valid point in terms of two things. One is in terms of access and availability of resources, and the other is the training. As you get access and availability, the training becomes easier as well, but both of these have to be tackled in parallel in order to get them in the classroom.
But Doctor, before even those two important points, you need to have the infrastructure for that.
Exactly.
And the political will from a country, in Africa, for example. No, I need to have an infrastructure that is very developed, that is capable of implementing those emerging technology in the educational system. How is this affecting that implementation, Doctor?
Sorry, I didn't get the question.
How will this affect the implementation of the emerging technology in classrooms or the system, educational system, if a country doesn't have the political will and the infrastructure that is needed for that?
It's true in a way. However, they might adopt it later than others. There obviously will be some sort of a race in order to get the tech into the classrooms, and the governments and the countries that are more willing to experiment and are more willing to take that jump will obviously be ahead in that race in terms of integrating technology into education. The others will follow suit soon enough, but then I guess they would do it when the technology has become even more mainstream. So when we talk about, let's say, mobile phones, we can see the evolution where it goes from when a few people had it, then everyone had it, then we moved to smartphones, and then now everybody has a smartphone, regardless of almost everybody has a smartphone, regardless of where they are. So in that sense, now everybody does have access to that technology. Some got it earlier, others got it later, but it's just a question of, you're right, it's a question of the infrastructure and the spending power that people have as well. So technology, when it comes out, when it's emerging, it is expensive and not as easy to access, but as it becomes more mainstream, it becomes easier to access. And the ease of access then makes it possible for everybody to get hold of it.
How are we blending together? It could be blended. So what we have in curriculums, are they easy to transform to be used through technology?
I don't think so. I think with technology, with integrating technology into the curriculum, one has to think of how the technology can be leveraged to be most effective. So when we had the pandemic and it was an emergency situation, and in 1 week, universities had to switch from classroom learning to online learning, we kept the same, let's say, form of delivery, just moved it online. But 6 months into the online learning, we already figured out that there's so many tools, such as Padlet, Mentimeter, there's online whiteboards, there's online collaborative tools, there's Kahoot quizzes. So there's so many of these online tools that you can use to enhance learning, and trying to replicate the traditional curriculum and just using somehow technology in it probably won't be as effective as truly understanding the capability of the technology itself and somehow tailoring the subject or the content to make the most of that technology.
Can you go back to those tools that you named, because they are interesting, because I don't know what are they, but it seems that they are emerging tools, technology can be used in a classroom. Please go ahead.
Yeah, so many of these existed before the pandemic, but they became very mainstream. But a lot of new tools actually were developed during as well, because teachers felt the need and educators felt the need for some sort of, let's say, quizzing platform. So when you're online and all the students, they have 60 students in front of them and they just need to do a quick poll. Now in the classroom, you would just say, students, raise your hands, those that want to do X or those that want to do Y. And you'd see the show of hands and see quickly, okay, this is the class majority that they want to do this over that. Now in an online setting, we don't, at least initially, we didn't have anything like that. So getting these online polling platforms or online quizzes platforms makes that kind of stuff very easy to do as well. And it's not just in terms of getting the popular opinion, but even asking questions related to the topic or related to the content can get very easy, and you can have competitions. You can see which student is doing well, which student needs to get more right answers. So all of that is also possible with these kinds of platforms.
That is amazing. Now, what skills I want to see now, the outcome. Let's start the outcome of this. We discovered the actual system of education of nowadays, how they can be implemented together or incorporated. We know what are those emerging technology and the challenges that could be faced. I want to know the outcome of this. What are the skills that those students in higher education or in a classroom in high schools can learn and have during their education using those technology? What are the skills that we didn't have? We, for example, you and I, we learned later on in our careers or in our lives.
Right. Again, it's with the way that the technology is evolving so rapidly, it might be kind of tough to predict what would be needed. However, it makes it even more easy to understand that what is the most important thing is flexibility and acceptance towards change, right? I mean, these are soft skills that might not have been the answers that you were expecting. I would say, yes. Let's say students should learn programming, or students should learn how to use technology effectively in terms of access to resources and all. But I think it's most important for students to understand and embrace change and be flexible and adapt to newer technologies as they come in. So I think that is one of the biggest things that even slows us down when there is a new technology that comes in. If the first feeling you get is anxiety, if the first feeling you get is, oh, I don't know how this works and I don't know how to use it, just tell me which button to press and I will do it. That is, that is, let's say, more problematic than being excited or open to change and willing to learn as these things come into the, the mainstream. Talking about not just 5 years from now, but let's say talking about 20, 25 years from now, it's impossible to predict the kind of day-to-day life we would be having. But in order to be able to embrace that change, you need to be able to adapt. You need to be able to be flexible, need to develop, let's say, critical thinking, understanding the implications of these kinds of technologies. I think those are the things that should be paid most attention to in terms of building the personality of the students that are in school right now, as to not get very bogged down or stuck in a certain way of doing things, because the way we do things keeps changing all the time.
And honestly, that's why it is really a priority also to teach the teachers, the instructor, how to deal with today's students. They are completely different from the other generation, and they change 180 degrees. They are not, have no similarities almost, beside that we are both human beings. There are a question that is interesting that is from an anonymous attendees, and I find it very, very interesting. How do we protect the personal data of the participants in a virtual reality communication? Interesting.
That's a very good one. And I love to talk about it because the more we incorporate technology into our day-to-day lives, the more we have to be careful about what data is being recorded and how it is being stored and how it is being used. Because even the AI demonstration that I showed to you, we don't know where these prompts are being saved, where this data is coming from, if there's a bias to it, if I'm being targeted for some sort of specific advertising. All of these things have to be kept into, have to be taken into consideration as we move everything online, or as we integrate technology into all of those things. So with VR, especially now with the new headsets that have come out, they're able to track your eyes. So wherever you're looking, they can see where you're looking. They can see whether your eyes are open or closed. There's physiological data that is being tracked by the Apple Watch. So there's so much, not just data of personal data that you type into the computer, but just your own physiological and sort of your eye tracking data and your heart rate and your skin conductance. All of that is also being tracked and stored somewhere. And you really want to be sure that it's not going to be misused in any way.
So yeah, that is another point that it is very important. The question is, should we be scared of this emerging technology being used in the educational system, or we have to push the legislature or so to do their homework and to come up with laws that protects everybody?
Exactly. And that's something that is a challenge, because as we've noticed in the past as well, technology evolves at a much faster rate than the law.
Yeah.
Technology, there's new technology that comes out every day that completely changes things. Law takes a while to catch up to it. And it's always, it's something that needs to be done in parallel. And as you say, there need to be wider changes in terms of ensuring ethical and legal, let's say, frameworks exist for a technology before it comes into the mainstream, before it comes into the classrooms, so that we're sure that there's clear transparency is what I want. Yeah.
And protect those pupils and those students from they were, very young to, of course, being adults. Another question that is very interesting that we have: can we define the estimation cost? It could be very high, and time for implementing this at our learning institution. This question is coming from Mr. Shadi Hassouba. I hope go ahead.
So are we talking about virtual reality? Or are we talking about...
I think he was talking about the virtual reality, yes.
Right. So VR, there is an initial cost to set up, let's say, the hardware, to get the headsets, to get the space in the classroom or in the building, to have a dedicated room where virtual reality can be virtual reality education can be carried out. However, again, given where we've come from, let's say 2017 to today, the change is immense. I remember my own, during my own research, the headsets that we used to use were about 2 kilograms, and we wouldn't be able to use them for more than 15 minutes, otherwise we'd have cramps in our neck. Now you have these completely wireless headsets that you can just connect and start playing with, even outside, inside, wherever. You don't need that much space. And every few months, every few cycles, like how it's with the iPhones and the smartphones, that every few months you get a new iteration, which is higher resolution, faster, quicker, and cheaper. So the price doesn't go up as much as the technology does. So it's the overall prices are kind of, staying the same, but the kind of technology that is integrated into the headsets is going up. So at this point, giving a number is tough. However, I can say that the number will go down as the technology becomes easier to access.
Still, for any institution, they have to allocate a budget for this new technology to be implemented. And still, since they are using, there are a lot of students, and this is not one screen for per classroom. This is for every student, correct? Yes. So that's what makes maybe cost.
I would also add into that budget some sort of expertise as well, because at this point, when you get let's say 20 headsets in the classroom, you also need support. You also need an expert who can maintain the headsets, maintain the quality and the content of the headsets that you get the students to use.
And the trainer.
And the trainer, exactly.
Yeah, for the teachers, because this is new to be introduced and incorporated in classroom. Another question, what about the social dimensions of technology in Arab society? And what may negatively affect the occurrence of social isolation among learners? This is an interesting question, especially the negative effect of social isolation. So this is coming from Dr. Sabri Shahwan. Very interesting question.
Yeah, no, and as much as I might sound like I'm trying to push for technology to be incorporated in the classrooms now, I am very well aware and I appreciate that we have to take care of these kinds of things. And that's where also the psychological research comes into the picture. And social isolation, we talk about it even in terms of social media right now. So where young adults are occupied with their phones on Instagram or on TikTok and are feeling that sense of social isolation. There's been a lot of research about it as well. Yeah. They feel that they might have a lot of friends or followers on the app, but they have that lack of connection in the real world. And that is something that may get amplified or not with VR, but that is something that we actually have to do some sort of longer term studies on as well in order to truly understand that. And I appreciate and I am aware that this could be a potentially, let's say, a negative effect of these kinds of technologies, but we have to incorporate it in a healthy, in a controlled manner. We don't want to just move everything in an online environment. So we don't replace it, we use it to enhance the current way of teaching.
True. When we talk, there are countries like UAE, they embrace technology, they have metaverse already that we can live in and go and enjoy our time. And they are very quick in embracing the technology. America as well, and other, Western country. Other countries in Africa, for example, they have other priorities. And if it is a priority, maybe they don't have the budget to allocate to this. My question, to what extent using technology in the education system in some part of the world and not in other could create disparities between countries and maybe between continents? What is the impact of this?
I think you're right that it would. I would imagine that it would create some sort of disparity, because having access to, even when we're talking about, let's say, virtual reality, like the examples we gave about the human anatomy, about dissecting a frog, about viewing a historical event being recreated in front of your eyes and being able to have, let's say, understanding how phobia treatment works in VR. All of these things give you such a strong hands-on experiential, let's say, value to your education, where it's not that you've just read about it in a book, you've almost kind of experienced it, you've lived through some sort of recreation of it, which again, I think that adds value to your education. And if you don't have access to it, maybe there is something lacking. However, again, I can't say anything for sure, because we would need to look at numbers, we need to look at research. However, in my experience, I think there would be that disparity where students that have had access to that technology would have had a slightly richer, slightly nicer experience. Yeah.
Yeah. How, I know you said earlier, I cannot see how the education will be in 5, 10, 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
But let me insist to use your imagination and tell me, how do you see the education system evolving over the next 10 years at least? And that is very fast for, that is very long-term time for a technology pace.
Yeah, no, it's usually when we make these predictions, we see how it has changed in the last 10 years and then try to extrapolate from there. However, in the last 10 years, the change has been much more than it was from the last 10 to the last 20 years. So in the 90s and the 2000s, the changes weren't as significant as they are from the last 10 years with the way the technology has evolved. So it's tough to predict it. However, the one main thing that I've seen that has changed is the access to the self-learning. And that's something we spoke about earlier as well. And I feel like that will become even more crucial, even more important, where even now when we take these online classes, we have recordings of these classes. So students really have access to this at their own pace. And I think with VR headsets at home, with access to agents, pedagogical, artificial intelligent agents at home, with access, even with stuff like robotics becoming much easier and more accessible, I feel like students will have a lot of time by themselves to explore these technologies and to explore these kinds of media and understand a lot of their, let's say, teaching and learning. So the classroom may or may not, well, for surely it will evolve and it will adapt. Maybe we have classes in virtual reality, who knows? But the thing that I feel might change the most rapidly and in ways we can't imagine would be in terms of self-learning, where students will have access to a lot of these kinds of technologies and be able to do this on their own.
I just have an idea, maybe it's a bad idea, but I felt at one point the student may know more than the traditional teacher.
Yeah, well.
At one point, because of the self-learning that we had.
And I think as an educator, nothing would make me prouder, right? I mean,
that's good.
Yeah,
that's
there's
very
a student that has put in the effort and has gained knowledge and an understanding of a subject that they were, let's say, in my classroom and were trying to learn from me, and have put in that much effort that they're actually answering questions for me. I mean, that's an amazing achievement I would take the credit for that, right?
Okay, excellent. So since maybe I'm assuming there are people who are following us from the attendees that work in an educational institution or own an educational institution. So can you advise on how to make incorporation and implementation of the emerging technology successful? What are the factors that need to be there to be successful?
Again, I think it depends on which kind of technology we're talking about. However, at this point, I think the most important is having someone with the know-how. So there's one where you would want to just spend the money and get the technology, but then it's no use if you don't know exactly how to use it effectively. So at this point, I think in terms of incorporating new technologies, if you have expertise, if you have training, if you have people that understand how this technology can be accepted and used in the classroom, I think at that point they need your full support, right? That if they can effectively bring in, let's say, virtual reality into the biology classroom and have a clear plan of how it will work, I think that's the support they need in terms of making it happen is what you should focus on, rather than trying to see that the other school has this laboratory or has this tech in their building and we want the same and we just get it. But if there is no understanding of how to use it, then it's going to stay there and not really be used in a right way.
Doctor, we now see how the institution will change, the education will change. do you think the workplace will change as well to be adaptable to those employable skills that got from those emerging technology in the education by the students?
For sure. Yeah. I think when we talk about these emerging technologies, we're talking about change at a much larger level than just in the educational institutes. And
it's another level.
Yes. And like you said, when we were discussing disparity, students that have had access to that technology in the classroom will be in a better position to continue using that kind of technology in the industry as well. So we already know of several companies that are using VR for training. So they're using virtual reality to onboard new employees, or if they're working in, let's say, manufacturing, or if they're working in architecture, the VR, let's say, content gives them an idea of how to operate a certain machinery, or how to develop certain, let's say, how to carry out their jobs. And those that have access to it and those that have experience with it are obviously much better suited to get, to succeed in that industry as compared to those that don't. So when we talk about this tech, we're talking about it large scale outside of education. However, within education, those that do have access to it would tend to be in a better position.
So to adapt to this new emerging technology being used and implemented in a classroom in any level, of course, of education, teacher has to change with their training, the institution will change, countries with their infrastructure will change, and workplace actually will change to adapt to this overskilled actually graduate. That takes me to, because we are almost done, to almost the last question. Let's see with time, how the future graduate will look like, how he is. Because I remember how I was just trying to learn everything from the beginning when I, get graduated. But how this graduate will look like?
Hopefully, yeah, a lot more prepared than I was probably in terms of just getting started with well, if they want to move into industry, or if they want to continue their education, get a master's degree, do a PhD, it's just the access to information that they have even now is so much more as compared to what we had, which puts them in a position of power, which puts them in a position of having this kind of knowledge in order to succeed. And I think one really nice thing, especially when we talk about robotics and computer science, is that we do have, let's say, connections with the industry, which allows students to already get into internships or work on actual platforms that are used in the industry. So when they come out of the university, they're ready to go. They're already experienced enough to understand what the needs of the, let's say, the workplace are.
Amazing. Dr. Sameer, thank you. Dr. Sameer Kishore, the head and founder of the Immersive VR Lab and program coordinator for the Masters in Science Robotic program at Middlesex University Dubai. It's very passionate to talk with you. This is amazing. I learned a lot, Doctor. Thank you so much. I was like in a classroom and just asking to learn from you. Thank you so much. Thank you. This was, of course, a session that was titled Transformation of Education Through Technology. Really thanks to Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum Knowledge Foundation and the UNDP and their amazing team for those days virtual Youth Knowledge Forum 2022. Thank you for all the attendees. Thank you for your valuable question. You really enriched the session with those questions. I hope we answered them. And if there's others, I'm so sorry because the time is up. There are now 1 hour break at 3 p.m. Please stay tuned. You will have a session about youth innovation for purpose of economies. Thank you so much for following us, and hope we'll meet soon. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Doctor. Thank you, Dr. Sameer.